Good afternoon, welcome to the UK Column Live. It is the 18th of February 2014 and it's just gone 1 o'clock. Myself, Louise Collins, Brian Garish and Mike Robinson are here in Plymouth on a lovely love and light kind of day.
It's a bit unusual, isn't it? We've actually got some sunshine, and as with Sunday where we saw the sun, people were out and about smiling and looking happy and normal, so that's obviously what does it. But we realise, of course, many people still around the country suffering the effects of the bad weather and the flooding, which we'll come on to.
Yeah, we will. Who's going first?
I think it's Mike on the subject of inflation.
Yes, good news. UK consumer inflation has fallen below the Bank of England's 2% target, and that's for the first time since November 2009, and that means that Mark Carney will not have to write to George Osborne this month, although I hear he did send George a card last Friday. So that boosts the case for the Bank of England to not raise interest rates, is what everybody is saying. But of course, we'll believe that when we see it.
Can I just comment there, Mike? Interesting to see that we've got a bar being used as a representation of inflation, nothing to do with industry or producing anything or manufacturing.
Right, and indeed we'll see that in stark contrast shortly. The headline consumer price index then rose 1.9% in January compared to 2% in December, and that was less than was expected by so-called economists. So the question is, which sectors saw rises and which sectors saw falls? And the keyboard isn't working, Brian, so if you could just move on to the next one for me.
Okay.
Just click again. Right. So as you can see from the bar graph here, non-essential things have seen falls in prices. Essentials like food, health, transport, education, and miscellaneous. These are the essentials of life. They saw rises or were flat on the month. So that's pretty unsurprising. Non-essential purchases, lack of demand, they fell, and that's been the main reason for it. Now, various economists have been commenting on this, and somebody said, it was Chris Williamson from a company called Market, said a drop in UK inflation to the lowest since November 2009 means the UK economy is enjoying a welcome combination of strong economic growth and low inflation. This Goldilocks scenario adds to the scope for policymakers to keep their foot on the accelerator for longer via lower interest rates to help drive a strong and more sustainable economy. Separate from that, the Office for National Statistics reported that along with this report, that 5.5% year-on-year increase in house prices. So average house prices have reached £250,000. So bearing in mind the effect of inflation and wage growth on living standards, the fact that there hasn't been any wage growth on living standards, £250,000 as an average cost is fairly unachievable for most people. What can you say about it? The economy goes on because people continue to need to work and to be employed and to earn a living. But in fact, nothing underlying has been changed, and we're still in this too big to fail. Let's pump up the housing market with hedge funds. Let's not do anything to deal with the underlying problems.
And of course, as we're here a little bit later, Miliband is talking about a massive homes building programme, never mind the jobs or the infrastructure. Let's get on to the homes. But tough things in the banking world.
Yeah.
Should be. We're having an interesting time at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Well, yes, another dead banker. This time another JP Morgan banker. So that's, 3 or 4 in the UK. Same in the United States. This is one in the Far East now. And this is another JP Morgan banker. And he jumped from the top of Charterhouse, where JP Morgan has its Asian headquarters. So this is the Chinese Morning Post reporting this. He's said to be in his early 30s, and it's a 30-foot building. And unfortunately, the photograph there shows him standing on the building just before he jumped. So yet another JP Morgan banker deciding that life isn't worth living. And question is why this is happening so often and why JP Morgan seems to be at the centre of it.
It's interesting, isn't it, Mike, that the press just reports it as a factual report on another suicide, but they're not actually coming and asking the basic question, why are we now getting a sudden cluster of bankers committing suicide?
I mean, are they really suicides? I mean, is that really him? That could have just been anyone standing up there? Are they really committing suicide, or do they know too much? We don't know.
We know from the UK ones that there are. What's going on in other countries, we don't know, but clearly something's going on, isn't it, in the banking world? And perhaps some good news for those who think the bankers should be brought to justice.
Well, this maybe gives a clue as to what's going on, because, of course, this is the first prosecutions over the LIBOR scandal. Interest rates being fixed, as we all know. Of course, nobody at the senior levels of the bank who were in charge at the time are being prosecuted. These are 3 traders. And what isn't being widely reported, we've mentioned it a number of times now, but what isn't being widely reported yet is that the next big scandal, even bigger than LIBOR, is just sitting in the wings at the moment, and that is the fixing of interest rates, exchange rates rather. And so perhaps that's what is causing some of these guys to remove themselves from the planet. But in the meantime, we're starting to see prosecutions filtering through. It would just be nice to see the likes of Marcus Agius and Bob Diamond and people like this who were actually in charge at the time answering some questions, and we haven't yet to see that happen in any meaningful way anyway.
Yeah, this is the key point, isn't it, Mike? Are we going to see something done in depth, or are we actually just simply going to watch a few people sacrificed in order to give the impression that there's some action being taken against the banks? And of course, the other thing is that our politicians were clearly in bed with the bankers, so they knew what was going on. They were taking instructions from corrupt bankers, and yet still no signs of any of the political names being brought to book.
No, well, indeed. I mean, you're exactly right. These are sacrificial lambs. These are attempts to sort of placate the public. And this is nothing. This is not going to change the culture of the banks at all. They're still taking risks. In the meantime, they're trying to say, well, we're going to change the bonus culture, and we're going to make sure that. Mark Carney was on the BBC on Sunday morning talking about how they were going to extend the length of time that people would have to wait to actually receive a bonus. So if they get a £1 million bonus this year, that would be held for a period of years in the hope that they would receive it at some point in the future. But if they'd done something that was particularly risky, which lost the bank money, then that bonus money would be clawed back before they actually get it handed over. Well, that's not really good. That doesn't really change the underlying problem, which is that risks are taken in order to generate profits, which generate bonuses. And of course, sometimes the risks go wrong. And of course, the bigger the risks, the more damage it does to ordinary people whenever they do go wrong.
Yeah. Well, we continue to follow that one, but of course we can rely on our politicians to sort things out, possibly.
No, and indeed we can't. And I think we've mentioned on a number of occasions on this programme, particularly on Wednesdays, about how disgusting Prime Minister's questions are, and real pathetic behaviour by just about everybody. Now, the Mail article here suggesting that Mr. Burko is saying that this is testosterone driven and that it's really hard on women. But in fact, from what I can see, most of the women that are in Parliament are absolutely taking part in the circus that it is. He has now reacted and written to the party leaders asking them to make sure that their members of Parliament behave themselves. But he seems to have only done that after being embarrassed into doing it, but having received a load of letters. And I don't know whether this is as a result of a Daily Mail campaign, but the Mail certainly trying to take credit for it. But nonetheless, I think maybe we were talking about it before the Mail was.
Yeah, but the headline here, Mike, is the usual sort of thing, isn't it? But do voters really want quiet in the Commons? As if people shouting and booing and jeering at each other and laughing when people are trying to make sensible points. As if we need this public school attitude of these people. And of course, the other thing which I'd like to flag up once again is when there was a debate in Parliament on the abuse of children and what was happening on that subject in UK, Parliament was virtually empty apart from, I think it was about 12 members. So these people are only there now and again, and when they're in Westminster, they're behaving like it's a bit of an insult to youngsters, isn't it, to call them children. but certainly unbelievably puerile behaviour by these people. And of course, is it any wonder that the country's falling apart? Of course, at the moment, I think I'm right in saying that the MPs are still not in Parliament. They're still in their latest recess until the 24th of February, I think it is.
Yeah, they're almost there as little as school children, aren't they?
Yeah, it's like half term.
Yeah.
Half term. Well, this is where things get serious, and we'd like to thank the person who sent us this email today. This is to do with the real subject of what's happening in UK, and that is treason. Now, this is an email exchange behind an organisation which maps out crimes in UK, and there's a debate going on here between the PNLD and Mr. Albert Burgess on the subject of treason. And I know the print's a bit small, but I shall read some of it out. PNLD are responsible for creating and distributing offence codes and their respective charge wordings relating to criminal offences in England and Wales. Our primary focus relates to those offences commonly used by operational police officers, law enforcement agencies, and prosecuted predominantly by the Crown Prosecution Service. It's often necessary to end date codes for purely procedural reasons, e.g. the offence is found to be a duplicate of a pre-existing code. Now, this is the meat of this exchange. The offence under Section 3 of the Treason Felony Act 1848, broadly referred to as treason, was attributed an identifying CJS code. However, the code was not accompanied by the specific charge wording, as it was not considered likely to be of regular use across the criminal justice system. Whilst there was never any suggestion that the offence had been repealed, it was removed from the PNLD due to the likelihood of the code never being used. The code, however, remains active should the necessity to use it ever arise. And the gentleman here goes on to say, PNLD also produce a spreadsheet of the codes created, which is manually updated on a regular basis. This spreadsheet is provided to Libra, which is another database at the Ministry of Justice. It would appear that during the recent push for transparency from the Ministry of Justice, this spreadsheet has been misunderstood, and their press release relating to repealed offences indicated the offence to which you specify had been repealed, which was incorrect. The spreadsheet contained a number of other inaccuracies and has since been removed from the Ministry of Justice website. We are presently working alongside the Ministry of Justice to produce a revised version of this document. So what they're really saying in this last paragraph is that basically they simply lost the crime of treason. So just make sure we've got it all here right in front of us in big text. It would appear that during the recent push for transparency from the Ministry of Justice, this spreadsheet has been misunderstood, and their press release relating to repealed offences indicated the offence to which you specify treason had been repealed. So the Ministry of Justice has lost the offence of treason. Now, presumably this is some amazing oversight, or else it's an incredible coincidence, or else it absolutely fits with the fact that we see politicians and indeed police committing treason and misprision of treason, failing to take action against treason after the public has actually reported evidence of this offence. And we can tell the viewers and listeners today that a number of charges of or complaints of treason have been laid at the door of police forces across UK. But what appears to be going on is absolute fear within the police forces concerned that they have been given the task of pushing this through the justice system. And the way treason works is that if you are made aware of treason and you fail to take action to stop it, whoever you are, whatever your rank, whatever your position in society, you become guilty of the serious crime of misprision of treason. So this is quite an unfolding story. Here's the website for PNLD, and you can read here that they're basically an information resource being used by police forces across the country, and they were originally part of the West Yorkshire Police Training Organisation. Now, we spoke to PNLD earlier this morning, and I've got to say the gentleman was extremely helpful. What we are more interested in, rather than PNLD, is actually what has been happening at the Ministry of Justice. There was a follow-up email from Mr. Burgess back to PNLD, and he said, "Dear Andrew, I would appreciate it if you would fully reinstate all treason offences so that when a constable comes across a treasonable act, he is able to identify it when he sees it." Now, what he's referring to here is that when these codes of crimes are pushed across, there's some 19,000 of them at the moment, Mr. Burgess is saying it's absolutely vital that there is a proper definition of the charge so that constables can act. And in the text, he says here that allegations of treason have been levelled at a number of MPs and also named police officers up to and including Sir Bernard Hogan Howe. And remember, of course, that Sir Bernard is the very same gentleman who we understand has said that he will not be investigating top-level paedophile Cyril Smith. Well, who has got responsibility for all this? Well, it comes down to this man, Chris Grayling, Lord High Chancellor of Great Britain, Secretary of State for Justice. He's just adjusting his dress there. But we say, well, what qualifications has this man got to run the effectively the legal system, the justice system in UK, and to protect the population from treason? Well, here's a bit of his background. BBC TV, and media management. So
no law background?
No, actually, he's the first person who hasn't had a law background in this job for many years. So we've got a man qualified in manipulation of the media, which of course the BBC is. Yeah. Perhaps there's been a little bit of manipulation of justice codes to make sure that treason disappears, which would lead all of our which would let all of our politicians who've been handing powers over to a corrupt European Union, treason's just drifted out the door.
That's staggering. Nothing at all about law. He's got the top job.
No, we've lost it.
Totally.
We did have a crime of treason, but unfortunately we've lost it. Well, why would we want to lose crimes of treason? Well, I think probably the Telegraph wins the prize here because they had this excellent article.
Yeah, well, it seems that Vivian Redding is getting a little impatient. She was addressing law students at Cambridge University, and she said that bold reforms were needed to avoid tensions across Europe. And she endorsed Churchill's view that the UK should remain apart from the United States of Europe, but the rest of the Eurozone should become a United States. And she also states that the ultimate goal is to ensure stability of the euro currency, and basically hurrying up for a call to get a one world government in place by the looks of things.
So she's rushing for the Euro state, but this article said what she was really worried about at the time. So she was particularly upset after her bags were taken that a cottage pie she'd bought at a London farmers market at the weekend was stolen along with her personal effects.
Oh,
so she listed all her exquisite jewellery, but said don't wear it because we will recognise it. But she was really upset that she'd lost her cottage pie. Why did she buy a cottage pie? Well, this very powerful lady bought it to show people how good British cooking is. I just hope that at least they eat it and don't throw it away.
Let's just hope she didn't get a horse meat version.
Is this pretty condescending or what? This is the woman who said we weren't actually well informed enough to have a vote on Europe.
Yeah.
But then she goes on to say in her talk, that 77% of EU migrants are economically active in Britain compared to 72% of British nationals. So she comes here, she attempts to eat our cottage pies, and then she is cheeky enough to say, well, actually, other Europeans work harder than you do.
Yeah, this is true.
Will somebody remove this lady from the country with her baggage and the remains of her pie? But we're laughing at her, but this is the real woman, isn't it?
This is the story
serious
I would be
woman.
looking at, about the United States of Europe and embracing everybody.
Right. So we've got British politicians giving away powers, which they are not empowered to do. So that is treason or misprision of treason. If they know it's going on, they don't do anything. And we are following a woman whose qualifications are a journalist and a Luxembourg councillor who's more worried about her jewellery than she is British jobs. It's
and
obscene.
More interested in her cottage pie than her jewellery. It is obscene. Totally. It's gone mad.
Well, are we going to do anything? Retailers propose new energy tax to replace business rates. We picked up on this one because, of course, here's the mention of an energy tax. And I think, Mike, you were suggesting you thought this might lead to something to do with the carbon tax.
Yeah.
Well, that's how it seems to me. But even the headline slightly disingenuous. Retailers propose. Well, in fact, it was the British Retail Consortium, which isn't retailers. It's supposed to represent retailers, perhaps, but it's another pyramid scheme, isn't it? With some people at the top making political propositions. But yeah, that's looking very much like replace business rates with a carbon tax.
Well, we dug into this a bit. I'm sure you're right on this. It says a proposal to transform the business rate system from a property-based tax into an energy levy is one of 4 recommendations published on Tuesday by the British Retail Consortium, whose members claim the present system is outmoded and anachronistic. Okay, what else did they say? Business rates, which help to fund local services, are currently calculated according to a property's rateable value, and that contributes around 25 billion a year to the Treasury's coffers. But business groups such as BRC say the system is no longer fit for purpose and discourages investments. So we thought we'd have a little look at British Retail Consortium, and here they are. And of course, the next thing is to say, well, what experience have the people got? What is their agenda? So here's a little look at the directors, and we find straight away Helen was previously head of retail at KPMG. And of course, KPMG is one of the big firms that crops up time after time after time, everything to do with our public sector through the NHS, defence, KPMG. We've got Tom Ironside. Well, he's been involved in a lot: business cost, reputational issues, property planning, regeneration, energy, transport tax, business rates, crime, employment, diversity and risk and safety, lobbying, public service delivery. So this man is obviously master of everything. We've got another one, Andrew Opie, heads up food and sustainability policy.
Oh, DEFRA.
Yeah, you got it. Look at what he's been involved with. Key government departments and agencies, FSA, DEFRA, Department of Health, and the European Commission. So do we think this man is independent? No, I don't think so. We'll end with this lady because she's got a lot of experience, including the British pharmaceutical industry and nursing, and she's specialised in birth control. I did wonder whether her job was to make sure there was no new little businesses sprung up, but I'm sure that she'll provide some form of prevention against that. It's incredible, isn't it? And you're going to show a few holes in the ground now, I think.
Indeed, yeah. According to the British Geological Survey, the number of sinkholes being reported has increased 5-fold, and they are warning when the flooding cases and ground levels start to recede, there is a high risk of more manholes appearing, more sinkholes appearing. A 20-foot hole opened up in Hemel Hempstead, and 20 homes had to be evacuated, and the same happened in the Isle of Wight. Apparently the southeast and parts of Yorkshire are the most susceptible to the sinkholes, as there's a lot of chalk in the southeast, and gypsum, which is soluble, and that's around Yorkshire. But I linked this quite in with what Miliband's calling from. So the Marxist leader has promised to build 200,000 new homes a year if Labour win the next election, and he made it clear that new towns and garden cities were the key to his plans. Agenda 21, possibly anybody? He also says the next generation of new towns are to be built within commuting distance to London and areas that are resilient to flooding. So get the people out of the areas, out of the countryside, where there could be floods and in around the cities, and it just stinks. Well, the whole agenda.
The interesting thing, we're going to add a bit. Sorry, Mike, we're going to add a little bit to this one. It's fine, but it's not just us that's beginning to pick up on the rhetoric from the British leaders. This was sent through to us today, and it's information coming out of some fairly influential Russian sources. And what they're talking about is Britain sleepwalking into disaster. They're pointing out Miliband's intervention on the national security aspects of climate change. And it quotes independent London-based journalist Andrei Ostulski as saying that the convening of Cobra was symbolic and has, of course, become a bone of political contention. He says that other countries really are experiencing climate emergencies, but Britain was simply not ready for unexceptional weather. Isn't it incredible that we've got these people from overseas who can simply be there, take a look at what's happening, and they hit the nail on the head? Mike?
Yeah, well, he has hit the nail on the head to a certain degree, but let's get away from this rhetoric that Britain was not ready. Britain was intentionally, it was an intentional destruction of Britain's basic infrastructure. This is happening on the roads, it's happening on the railways, it's happening with our water supplies, it's happening with our energy, it's happening with our flood defences. And as Ian Crane points out, Somerset Levels has been dry for over 1,000 years, and yet here we are. So when was it drained? 4th century. So here we are in the 21st century and we can't keep it dry? I don't think so. This is an intentional policy. So it wasn't that we were not ready. This notion that this weather is exceptional is based on climate models which are flawed at best. And so the idea that we should only have this X amount of rainfall in January and therefore we've had exceptional rainfall is nonsense. Therefore money has been pulled out of keep maintaining basic infrastructure, and that's the same with the sinkholes. The basic infrastructure is gone, and therefore things are happening under the ground which otherwise should not be happening. And as you say, soluble rock is being removed, and the ground is collapsing as a result. This is government policy in action. It's not nature.
No, exactly. I mean, do you think that they are they're just stepping everything on every level at the moment to enforce this, getting ready for this one world government and Agenda 21 plans?
To remove people from the land.
People from the land, and we've got that lady, the United States of Europe, that Vivian Redding, Miliband building these garden towns just out, with outside cities with direct commuter trains in. Are they getting worried that they're falling behind time? Because it seems to be ramping up at an incredible level.
They're talking about now a United States of Europe, which of course is what the so-called skeptics were saying 20 plus years ago. Now we can see the reality. But what's interesting is that they're talking about Britain being left on the periphery. And I'm just beginning to think that maybe enough people are awake in this country that Europe is beginning to realise that to bring Britain fully into a United States of Europe is too dangerous, because we're a pack of trouble and that could spread to the other states. So we're now hearing this business, we might leave you to the side.
If anybody's sceptical about the idea of people being moved out of the countryside, let's just remember some of the rhetoric we've been hearing from various political sources recently, that we cannot protect everywhere. We've got to concentrate our protection on certain areas. So if you want to live in the countryside, you got to do without the protection. If you want the protection, you got to move to the city. That's something that they're absolutely pushing at the moment, and this fits in absolutely with the Agenda 21 policy. And if anybody isn't aware of what Agenda 21 is, if you go to the UK Column homepage, there's a link to the new ebook on Agenda 21. Please download it and have a read. Lots of useful information in there, and hopefully in the next day or two I'll manage to bully one of the research teams to coming onto this programme to talk about it.
Okay, well, Mike, we did anticipate some of your comments a little bit because this was also sent in to us today, an article in NSNBC International. And it's a very interesting article. I think it's written by a professor at, I think it's Warwick University. It's certainly a British university. I'm sorry if I haven't got that correct. But what the meat of it is the article is saying that in the past decade or so, the UK has witnessed a number of serious floods, with those that struck Yorkshire and central England in 2000, signalling the start of apparently flood-rich phase. Historical records show this is not unknown. A number of such phases can be identified. And here he's saying over the last 500 years, but he admits that there have been relatively few severe floods since the 1920s. But with memory and experience of floods reduced in many communities, expectations of what could be expected is reduced. So there's some hard stuff in there and some soft stuff, but the meat of it is that all of the evidence is there that in the past, and this gentleman's going back 500 years, we know what the weather does in this country. So yeah, we'll agree with you on that, Mike. It's not we've been a bit incompetent. This is the government absolutely failing to put in the infrastructure. So let's see him again. Well, here he is, because what's Miliband? We haven't got over the problems of flooding. We haven't got over the problems of building homes on floodplains. And now what's he going to do? Pack in more houses?
He is going to pack in, as we just commented, actually, just from the previous article, that his plans are communities just like Stevenage and Milton Keynes within commuting distance to the capital. So, as we said, Agenda 21.
Move people off the land, get them into things. And there was a document, I don't know whether you can remember the name of it, Mike, where we saw that there were planning documents for future cities in which they had ghetto areas designated for people who protested or caused trouble. I think Jonathan Porritt's name was connected with one of those documents. We'll see if we can dig that out. Well, he's a red, but this is the other key man, BBC. We always love to talk about the BBC. So Mr. Yentob has said that 183,000 is only half of his salary. He deserves the whole lot. So with his two roles, he's on £330,000 a year. He earns 183 as a creative director and 150,000 for presenting. And he came under fire because of his salary. But in response to that, he said it is half a salary, talking about his £183,000 role. And he continued to say the only reason people criticising is because he's easily taken the mickey out of. Yentob is believed to have a pension from the BBC worth just over £6 million. And he was asked about Savile and his thoughts, and all he could come out to in response to that was people needed to be given credit for speaking out. So that was entirely the thoughts of this BBC man on the Jimmy Savile story and saga. Yeah.
That's the only comment he could come out.
I suppose if you earn, what is it, £22,000 a month? Have I got that roughly in the right area? It must be pretty difficult to decide what you're going to do.
Yeah, it must be. Exactly. Horrible.
Of course, it's our money at the end of the day. Well, Mike, NHS.
Yeah, I'm afraid this is another one where we're going to have to say, we told you this was coming. Many people have seen this coming, of course, not just us, but we've certainly been talking about it for a number of years. And here we go. Too old to get life-saving drugs. Anybody over a certain age is going to, well, there's a big concern that younger people are going to be prioritised over older people for drug treatment. Plans would consider wider societal benefits when giving out medicines. So the question then is, are you worth saving? Are you worth saving? Are you contributing much to society? If you're not contributing, then you don't really deserve your life saved should you fall ill.
This is the friendly fascism that a number of our viewers talk about. So we've got public school, overwhelmingly public school men in their pinstripe suits sitting in Parliament, making decisions as if they're very nice, honourable, trustworthy people. But actually the agenda is straight out of Nazi Germany. If you can't work for the state, you're a useless eater. If you're mentally or physically disabled, you can't work for the state and we're going to get rid of you. It's
Yeah,
just
well-
being drifted through.
I mean, this is actually even worse than Liverpool Care Pathway, really, isn't it? I mean, they get.
Well, it's the next stage.
step up,
Liverpool Care
exactly.
Pathway was kind of one way of dealing with something. They're extending this now. Now it's interesting that in the article itself, the suggestion is that NICE, the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, is actually the body complaining about this. But of course, it's NICE's policies. This is the ultimate destination of NICE's policies that have been running for the last 20 years since they were, I can't remember when they set up exactly, but certainly 20 years. The idea that medicines need to be rationed and that there just isn't enough to go around. And of course, this is absolute rubbish, because the main problem with the National Health Service is that money is being spent in the wrong areas.
It'd be interesting to have Clive de Carle's take on this story as well.
Well, we
actually.
can ask him.
Natural Health, we can, yeah.
But of course, other problems in the NHS over
Yeah.
data.
Okay, so this article is written by actually Liberty's Policy Director, Rachel Robinson. And most of you will know about Liberty and the links with Common Purpose and Chami Chakrabarti. And Rachel Robinson is really going over what we already know about our medical records being sold. And there's not much other info in this article as to who our records are actually going to be going to in the private sector. I mean, we know they're going to be shared with the police, with health agencies, social services, and Department of Work and Pensions. But when I saw the headline, I thought, well, there might be some info into who they're going in the private sector, as in private health firms, Serco, and those. But there is no other information. So my question is, why is Liberty speaking out against this, and what role have they got to play in it? So I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Brian.
Well, I just regard Liberty as an arm of government. They simply come out with an agenda to enable any policy to go through. Chami Chakrabarti was on video at a meeting, I think it was up in Hereford or somewhere like that, where basically she said, well, it's pretty obvious that there's a dictatorship coming and there's nothing we can do about it. Yeah. So I think they're just a front. And of course, National Council for Civil Liberties, the forerunner of Liberty, CCL, was actually helping to promote pro-paedophile agenda. So what is Liberty? Don't know.
Okay, so this article's interesting. This is back in 2011, and Computer Weekly was actually warning that Atos had won an £8 million 5-year contract that would retrieve patient info from GP practices. This 2011 article also states that the service would play a role in a process of providing payments to GPs and Clinical Commissions Group. Even back then, they were highlighting that the system could lead to widespread privacy breaches of confidential patient information. It also says Atos' role would be to supply the software that would extract the data from the GP's offices. And I just want to remind people, I think you've only got a couple of weeks to take yourself off the list and remove yourself and your family from having your records shared. So best to get down to the doctors to fill in one of those forms. Unfortunately, you can't do it online, nothing comes through the post. And literally the only way people are finding out about it is through the press. So if you know vulnerable people and you feel that they wouldn't want their records shared, please mention it to them and maybe even pick up a form for them. Yeah. So, but that was an interesting that in 2011 that we were being warned about this a couple of years ago, but obviously didn't come out.
People are just picking up on it. But Atos here in the Guardian.
Well, this is what I wanted to highlight. Atos, who have been in charge of all our medical details, have actually. They're about to be ousted from the £500 million contract, and it's been in the firing line since widespread anger over the work capability assessments, as thousands of vulnerable people have been wrongly judged on their ability to work. So what companies are going to likely to be in the race for Atos's contract, which is approximately £115 million a year? Well, there should be no surprises, really. We have G4S in the running, Serco, Capita and A4E. And those are the government's preferred bidders.
Yeah. So if we bring it up here, what we've got, this was, according to the article, a leaked Department for Work and Pensions financial review. It says ministers across the government working together to build up competition by commissioning other private firms. So the government is assisting a number of special private firms to make more profit out of the system.
Yeah.
Well, it's worse than that. What they effectively have is a cartel. So we've got G4S, guilty of fraud. We've got Serco, guilty of fraud. They've been invited back by the government to join the cartel. We've got A4E that completely messed up the can't remember the name of the scheme they were running, the return to work scheme. I can't remember what it was called. Completely messed that up. So they've been taking taxpayers' money, and we've got, who was the other one?
Capita, who handles the TV license while at the same time running bailiffs company. So if you don't pay your TV license, they send their own thugs to try to retrieve the money. So we've got all kinds of corruption going on there, and these are the four preferred bidders that are basically bidding for every government contract, every major government contract, and the government contracts are just shared out among the four of them. So that's a cartel. Yes, it is, definitely.
And if you're going to run a cartel, you need people who are prepared to commit treason, and of course you need a mechanism for controlling those people who commit treason, which we'll come onto shortly. But just to show that the UK column has been doing the job, we emailed the NHS data unit yesterday, and we said, dear contact centre team, can you please supply or direct us to where we might find the risk analysis which the NHS has carried out in determining the future safety and confidentiality of patient data shared under the proposed patient data sharing programme. And we also asked for a comprehensive list of the names of the companies and other third parties that are going to be allowed to share that data. As of yet, of course, we haven't had a reply. But how do you control your bent MPs? Well, we come back to the famous subject of child abuse.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this goes through to film director Steve McQueen about modern slavery, which I'm going to dig into more. But I just wanted to bring some figures up. The NCA, National Crime Agency, has released figures showing an 155% rise in children being groomed and trafficked. And they also claim the increase of 47% in human trafficking cases. But I'm going to be doing a little bit more on this, especially by this film director, Steve McQueen, because apparently it's far more than what this Mr. McQueen is saying.
Throwing most of the paper on the floor, but never mind, hands up in horror. Well, this is the reality. This was sent around the internet this morning. It's from a website called Real Whitby, and it is a very comprehensive article which is principally talking about the failures of West Yorkshire Police to conduct proper investigations into Savile, and the operation that they did conduct was called Operation New Green. And this article says it's been widely condemned as a farce. Alan Collins, a solicitor representing 40 of Savile's victims, is quoted in the press as having told ITV's Daybreak programme, the report begs a lot more questions. It provides some answers, but the report reveals memories that are not as sharp as perhaps they ought to be. Can't remember, documents that can't be located. It doesn't add up, but my take is there seems to be a collective myopia, and the collective myopia is evidenced by Savile. He was able to run rings around the police for decades. He used police officers. He was ingrained with them, dovetailed with them. Yeah. So this man clearly saying, in his opinion, the paedophiles are there in the police networks, and that, of course, is exactly what UK Column believes, and serious child abuse campaigners such as Bill Maloney.
Yeah, I'd like to just bring up a little bit of more of this article where they're talking about the BBC, and they state the following revelations were made in the BBC Inside Out documentary aired on Monday the 10th of February 2014. The archived BBC was shown providing that Giaconelli, and he was actually former mayor of Scarborough, was an associate of Savile, practiced judo with Savile, filmed in Scarborough for the BBC. Multiple witnesses alleged that complaints had been made to North Yorkshire Police about Peter Giaconelli in his lifetime, alleging that he was a paedophile. It was alleged that North Yorkshire Police had admitted at the time it was completely aware of the allegations about Giaconelli. There had been other complaints, but Peter Giaconelli was never arrested because of his status as a councillor and mayor. It was further alleged that a statement had been taken as part of a formal criminal complaint. It is also alleged that it was common knowledge throughout Scarborough that Giaconelli was a paedophile, and it emerged that North Yorkshire Police Operation Yewtree investigation had not bothered to interview any of the witnesses developed by Real Whitby has come
So this is the meat of the problem. Just a couple of articles to finish off with in the last few seconds. Thanks to the UK Column viewer that sent this. Basically, it's saying that there's a debate started in Russia on banning Russian children from being sent for adoption in Belgium because of the child euthanasia laws. So very interesting that the Russians seem to have got a grip on things. And we had to bring up Syria because these are the latest daily deaths reported to us of civilian casualties, men, women and children. And of course, Cameron and William Hague are the men who have helped foment this terrible situation in Syria. So just remember who is creating the wars and violence in the world today. And I'm afraid we've got to look to our own politicians.
Well, that's it for today. Just remind people, if you're liking what we're doing and you want us to continue and to be making some more shows, it would be really helpful if people could start subscribing to the ukcolumn.org and taking out a subscription and supporting what we're doing. We do have bumper stickers and pamphlets, flyers, T-shirts as well, and all the money does go to keep this going, keep the studio going and running and making more programmes. Yes, Mike.
Don't forget Health Revolution with Clive at 9 p.m. tonight.
Okay, thank you for that. Last comment from me is we've had a secret guest today sitting with us in the studio who we're going to identify as Chris. And Chris was, of course, the original man who started the #1 edition of the Devonport column many years ago. So we're going to say thank you, Chris. And look at what's happened since then worldwide, and we're not sure how many copies produced, of course, now the UK column, but over 1 million. So that's thanks to all you people out there who've helped support us.
Thank you so much.
See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye.